when we think about 16th century playwrights, and often when we learn about 16th century playwrights at school, we hear one name, and one name only, and that is Shakespeare, William Shakespeare. But what actually a lot of people don't know is that at the start of his career and for the first few years, he actually wasn't the most famous and like well-known, well-respected playwright. There was actually one who was 2 months different in age to him, but was much more successful, until he got murdered at the age of 29 in very disputed circumstances. And that playwright is Christopher Marlowe, so I thought I'd take time to look into reading all of his plays and understanding his work. But in making this video, I have learned so much about this man, and I feel like if he was writing plays and out here making work today, he would be someone that these pop culture and celebrity culture commentators would be talking so much about. Like, he was so controversial back in the day, and I feel like you really get a sense of the personality behind this man, because the plot of his life is crazy. Like, many people say that like people of the day, like history's boring, like classical playwrights are boring. This man can single-handedly prove that wrong, because he was widely considered to potentially be a secret agent. He's probably gay and has so much positive gay representation throughout all of his plays. He went to the pub a lot and said many different controversial things. He was very opinionated. He was also atheist, which it wasn't really considered that okay to be atheist back in the day. Like, it was a very religious time. So he was actually saying so many different bold statements, to the point where this document, the Baines Note, was produced with all of his controversial opinions and statements and quotes that he'd said in private, published to show how dangerous they believed he could be to society and the public peace, and how he could like seduce people into really extreme considered views. And also he's claimed to have said, "All they that love not tobacco and boys are fools," which, like, if he wasn't so aggressive, violent, temper-filled and like offensive, like, he could be considered quite a gay icon for saying that. And I feel like I have such a vivid picture of who this guy could be and who he was. And also, in a rogue side plot, he was also counterfeiting money in the Netherlands, which, like, he should have got the death penalty for, but he didn't. Like, he's got so many different weird side plots to his life, and he was writing so many successful plays that are still performed today in his 20s. So I feel like there's no excuse for us in our 20s to be like, oh, we're young, we're like new to the industry still, like maybe when I'm more established, like I could write. Like, he was doing so much in the industry. And I'm filming this sort of in the future because I've actually gone through the plays already, but I thought I'd show you that I actually have a copy of the complete works of Christopher Marlowe here, and I read 4 of them, which I feel like I would have found quite difficult without translation for Shakespeare. But because Christopher Marlowe's language is more direct and less sort of flowery, he's widely considered to be easier to access reading wise. So that's something that's interesting to know that I thought I would share. And with that, let me introduce you to all of Christopher Marlowe's plays. So Dr. Faustus is the Christopher Marlowe play that I am the most familiar with and have been exposed to the most. So I feel like it is probably the most famous out of all of his plays, because I watched a version of it with 3 actors, I think, roughly, in school, and it was a very high energy, fast-paced, dramatic performance. And I also auditioned for it and also got recalled for it, and I also watched the first and last night of amateur version of it, and I've also read it. So I feel like through being exposed to it so many times, I have gradually gained an understanding of it. However, I know that it's a classical play, so like when I bring people to it for the first time, sometimes they're a bit confused, but I feel like I have like a stronger grasp of what goes on. So Dr. Faustus, he wants to have power and control, and he wants to be able to control like these spirits from hell and like have powers to like do whatever he likes. and like supernatural powers basically for 24 years he does a deal with in exchange for his soul. So at the end of it he's meant to give away his soul, but this turns into quite a tragic element of the play because towards the end of the 24 years, obviously then you're gonna think none of this was really worth it. Like, I don't want to lose my soul to hell forever. Obviously that's not a very appealing prospect, but it's quite interesting. There's lots of different elements to it. Also, Faustus does loads of pranks, basically. Like, he uses his powers of invisibility, he requests to be able to bring fit women back to life, like Helen of Troy. He wants to see the most attractive women there have ever been, ever. And also he wants to impress people, like this woman wants grapes but they're out of season, so he uses the powers to like get grapes from where they're in season and bring them back really fast. So then she's like, what, like it's grapes? Because I mean that wouldn't work so well now because we have very good transport and you can get grapes all year round, but back then they would have been like, what, grapes, then what? And also he tricks people, like he's like, I'll give you a horse but you just can't use the horse in water, and they take the horse in water and it turns into a bale of hay. Like, he's just having a great time using these powers. So there's a lot of different fun that you can have with that. And also there's the element of like a lot of this being to do with spirits in hell, like the 7 deadly sins are characters in this play, so you can take them any kind of way you like. Like, there's a lot of comedy to be found in this play, there's a lot of tragedy because he's losing his soul, and like it's quite intense, hell is, obviously, so you can make that really like spicy and like mysterious and genuine and serious and scary, or you can like create a more sort of dry representation of it. Like, when I went to my recall for Faustus, I saw lots of different ways to sort of present it because lots of different people were also playing the main character who sort of communicates with Faustus, called Mephistopheles, and that's a really interesting character because you can play it like everything's obvious and it's like, in hell, like, yeah, what? Like, really dry and not too intense, or you can be really manipulative and really scary because, like, yes, he does have control for those 24 years, but also who's really in power, who's really got the power in this play, because he's only got 24 years, and they probably know that he'll regret it eventually. So the power dynamics are really interesting, the influence of the supernatural, like there's tragic elements, comedy elements, there's hell, and you can take that in very extreme adaptations and directions. So there's a lot of different ways that you can take it, which means that it's quite fun to be able to explore because there are so many different creative options for it. And also with this play there's an A text and a B text, and it's actually the longer version that's the later version. Like, a few years after Faustus was written they wrote and added in new scenes, so it's interesting because there's lots of different versions of it, like it's not just one specific text. So the Massacre at Paris is considered to be very short for an Elizabethan play. I think people generally say it's got a running time of under 90 minutes. So people think that with the way it's structured and stuff, it's not the entire copy that we have. So either it's a condensed version and like stuff has got lost, or people think it might be a memorial reconstruction, which is where they might get the actors together who have performed it before and be like, what parts can you remember, and put it together. So as a result of that, it's like death after death after death after death after death. Like, it's 24 very short scenes, and it has the highest death count I think of any Elizabethan play, despite it being so short, 18. So characters are just introduced and killed on repeat. I have never read the word stab him so many times. Like, it's based on some religious wars that were going on in France, and there was a lot of actual killing going on in like 1572, I think. This play is unlike anything I've ever read because it's basically a sequence of scenes in which someone walks in and says, I'm gonna stab you, and then someone's like, well, can you not do that, or like, or can I say my prayers first? And then they get to do that, and then they're stabbed and immediately killed, and then sometimes they try and dispose of the body, or sometimes not. And it's just that on repeat. So people say that it's sort of got a level of dark humour to it because we don't really have attachment to the characters. It's sort of desensitized violence. Then equally, our guy Marlowe was actually stabbed and killed. So I think it's important to remember that these things happen, like suddenly people stab people for all sorts of different reasons, and it can feel quite sudden, and that's also a reflection on real life. And it's interesting that, like, as human beings, sometimes we watch performances, we watch theatre, we watch film where people are killed, and we can move on with our lives after that and like feel detached from it. Like, it's interesting from a human point of view. But because it's so self-aware with the dialogue, it's like, I'm going to stab you now. And then, like, the characters are talking as they're stabbed, like, before they die. Like, it's very much, like, that on repeat. So it sort of has comedic value in it being self-aware, and that's how it can be played. However, I don't know about that, because, like, people were genuinely killed in France in religious situations, and it's killing people who, like, you don't really know, and it's a bit toxic killing people, obviously, but like, it's an interesting play. Like, I think it would be interesting to see it be performed, because it's just lots of people being killed in quick succession. So Tamburlaine is a military drama on a huge geographical scale, and also a lot of it is set in Asia, which I've read there's a few different Elizabethan and historical plays set in Asia, but I feel like I haven't encountered that many. So that's really nice and interesting. But also it's in 2 parts, and each part I think is potentially over 3 hours, so it's over 6 hours of play. So people often perform it either condensed into one night, and I think when it's condensed into one night it's mostly part 2 that's cut down, or they do it as a 2-nighter thing, which I think is quite cute and wholesome. Like, maybe it would be like more cute and wholesome if it was like not an intense, violent military play. But like, imagine going to the theatre one night and being like, "I'll see you guys tomorrow, let's watch part 2 together." Like, it's cute, it's nice. But part 1 is an interesting exploration of Tamburlaine's rise to power, because Tamburlaine is having all of these people who are challenging him, and some are defeated quite quickly, others it takes longer to defeat, and he's quite an articulate leader with his words, and he's quite charismatic. Also in part 1 he's quite bold, because this city wants to be saved, so they send 4, I don't know how I can describe them, 4 women who like are married, because like chastity was a big thing back in the day, like the purity of women who haven't been with men yet. So they sent them to like beg for the freedom of the city, but he just kills them all. So he's quite a harsh military leader, which leads into part 2, which is more about his downfall, and you know that he's like having a downfall, but you don't know quite how it's going to end. And I think it's more psychologically interesting, because lots of what happens is quite sinister. Lots of people die in quite like graphic ways, and also he's sort of trying to make his sons become like conquerors of the world like him, and when one of his sons doesn't fit his standards, he kills his own son. So it's quite sinister, and like, he's no longer the charming leader that he once was. He's actually quite mentally disturbed, and no longer got that kind of charm that leads you to still support him as a protagonist. So it's interesting because all of the characters gradually become less and less likable, but also because it's such a long play, to be honest, I do find it difficult to like remember all of the action. I think it's partly because I watched a podcast that would like stop and talk through interpretations and different elements of it, but I wasn't like seeing the action live, so maybe that made it less memorable. But I was grateful for that, because otherwise like it's hard to understand. So maybe I should watch it as well at some point to understand the full scale of it. But it's a very sizable piece of drama, with it being 2 parts. and so lengthy, but I think it's really interesting to explore how we can get charmed by these military leaders who can then go on to do such like huge violent atrocities and stuff. Like, it's reflective of a lot of different situations, I think. So this play very much feels like A Midsummer Night's Dream, but make it a lot wilder. Like, there's a love square still, and there are the gods who are making the queen fall in love with someone else, who then she becomes really obsessed with, and like he has his ships parked there and he wants to leave because like he is interested, but also there's that sort of interesting debate, like even nowadays, about like he wants to be who he was before and still do all of these military things and have all of these achievements. Like, he doesn't just want to be in love and not have a life outside of that. Like, he wants to still be achieving stuff. And it's interesting because in relationships, often people feel like they have to sacrifice what they'd really want to do in order to be able to be around and like aligning your path with whoever you want to be with, which is really interesting to be able to explore. But this is quite dark because, spoiler, but like he ends up breaking away and going to Italy, and then like everyone else sort of kills himself at the end, which is really dark. And it's interesting to see a lot more of a messy, less sanitized sort of version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And it's all set like in the BC times, like there's like Trojan heroes and stuff like that. So it's interesting, and it's interesting to have such a powerful female character at the center of it as well. Like, she is controlling the fact that he can't leave. She's fixing his ships. She's so powerful. So I went into reading Edward II with a certain idea of what I thought I was expecting, and it wasn't at all that. So basically, Edward II is about this king, Edward II, and he really, really likes this man, Piers Gaveston, and he doesn't really care so much about anything else that's going on with the country politically, like France might invade. He doesn't really care because all he wants is his man. But obviously back in the day especially, like having the opportunity to be close to the king was very important for all of these men. So they're thinking, why is this man able to have so much access and time to the king when like he is not as worthy to spend time with the king by like birth or anything like than they were? So lots of people are really annoyed about the fact that he's so close with this guy, but like he's telling everyone he loves this guy, like he's really, really in love. And it's not even like one of those classical plays where it's like they might be gay and everyone likes to read into it and be like, yes, there's some representation if you like read it really carefully and like read it in a certain way. Like, he's saying he loves this guy. He does have a queen who he's married to, but she's really heartbroken and she's really upset because she keeps being left for this man, and then she eventually leaves him for someone else, and they have a big sort of like fight where it's like the queen's side versus like the king's side and the king's man who he's in love with, because he's very much like telling the queen like, don't touch me, and he's like, I'll kiss you if you manage to get me my man back. Like, he's obsessed with this man. He's really in love, and it just goes against what you'd expect from 16th century, is it 16th century, like that kind of era drama about kings. You don't expect there to be a gay romance. But I've read up on it now, and I think actually there are quite a few historical kings who are suspected, like now, we'd suspect them to be gay, but obviously back in the day, I don't think it was so much of a like acknowledged and named sexuality. So all of these men will be like really annoyed, all the other men who want to be able to have power, as to why he's spending so much time and investment in one man who they don't think is worthy in any other kind of sense other than like that romantic attachment to the king. So it is interesting to be able to look at, and I think it's really powerful to be able to put it on stage in a modern context. And it's also considered to be one of the best written out of Marlowe's plays. So the Jew of Malta as a play just really makes me feel very uncomfortable for a variety of reasons. So firstly, they tried to take half of the money of the Jewish population in order to pay off some debts in order to maintain protection for the island of Malta, which is questionable, trying to sort of steal from Jewish people. I don't like that. I don't like that this Jewish man in the play is portrayed as a villain, and like he kills so many people. Like he kills a nunnery, he kills his own daughter, and it just feels a bit like it's like reflecting the anti-Semitism of the medieval times that was really present, and like there was a certain type of anti-Semitism at the time that's really, really present in this play, and the fact that it was really, really popular as a piece of theatre makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't like to associate myself with this guy Marlowe anymore. I don't like it, because also his daughter, they take his house and turn it into a nunnery, so she pretends to want to be a nun in order to go and rescue some like jewels and some of his wealth that he's hidden in the house. But these men are like, oh, like she shouldn't be a nun, like she's so fair, she should be like in the marriage bed or something, she should be in her lover's arms, and she's like 14, and I'm like, don't try and sleep with children. So watching this back, I feel like I'm gonna get called out for the fact that like actually realistically, was everyone getting married at 14 and probably like popping out a load of kids? Probably. And maybe the people who are interested in her are also 14. So maybe me consistently calling it a play about paedophilia is maybe not historically accurate, but then also there are some people who say that like it's late teens, like early 20s, young adults playing the love interests of a 14-year-old, and that is obviously not right at all. But my problem is just instinctively, as a modern reader, reading the fact that like she's fair and she's like just turned 14, reading that as a trait that's meant to be attractive, just turned 14, is jarring and is horrendous, and I don't like it because there are lots of people who in the modern world feel like that, and they're very dangerous, predatory people. So maybe it's fine and that's just the culture of the time, but I just thought I'd put that in as an alternative perspective to what I'm about to say. So that's quite uncomfortable, and the fact that like her dad kills both of these lovers and like guys who are interested in her despite her having a genuine interest in one of them, so she rejoins the nunnery and then he kills all the nuns there, like that's uncomfortable on a level. The paedophilia, the anti-Semitism, like it's just too much, and I don't like it. And maybe, well, I don't know how rescuable it is as a play. I don't know if maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I feel like I'm not. And I felt weird reading it, and I felt paranoid that everyone knew that I was reading a weird anti-Semitic paedophile drama at work. So I'm not a huge fan of this play. So I've gone through all of the plays now, so I thought now would be a good time to debrief and chat about some of the patterns, some of the things I've noticed. So firstly, I feel like there are some good rhyming speeches in a few of the plays, like rhyme is used, and also quite a bit of Latin, and I don't speak Latin, and I don't know if it's potentially a bit more than Shakespeare that he uses, like a couple lines of Latin here or there. He also uses a bit of Spanish, which I found a bit easier because I was sort of skimming through the Latin, but I'm learning Spanish. I speak a bit of Spanish, quite a bit of Spanish, so I was able to sort of follow the Spanish, so that was nice. But something that people have noticed in Marlowe's plays is that actually there's a lot less of that sort of poetic language, like he's a lot more direct and to the point. So some people say that it's a bit worse quality of writing, but also he died young, and he did have a better reputation while he was alive compared to Shakespeare. So we're comparing Marlowe's early work often to Shakespeare's later work, which is why we think that he might be of a lower quality. Some people do. I say we, it's not me at all, but just generally that's a thought that people have. But really, like, he was 29, he was writing all of these in his 20s. So I think he's just a lot more direct anyway. Like, he got into a lot of fights, he was very vocal about his opinions, so maybe that's also his character speak a bit the way he spoke. And also he's known to have written like a sympathetic portrayal of gay characters, because I've read that in a lot of texts historically, the sort of gay sexuality was presented as weird and abnormal and like a reason for people doing bad things, and was used to vilify people, but actually he expresses it as a truthful sexuality and a real human positive thing. Also, a lot of this work is actually not original Marlowe story. Like, a lot of this comes from history or other stories being told. Like, other people had told variations of the story of Dr. Faustus and Dido, but he just told it in his own way, and in some ways, like, it differentiates in perspective from some of the other different interpretations. And also, Edward II is a ballet as well. So Edward II is a story that has been told in many different ways, but is generally accepted that like he has male lovers, which is interesting that that's sort of a thing that's out there that I didn't know, because I didn't know what Edward II was about, but now I know what the ballet's about as well as what this play's about, and there's many different versions of these stories. And I think Shakespeare was also one to do that. Like, Romeo and Juliet isn't his original story, it's a traditional Italian story that's been told many times under various different variations of it. So I think that was quite common to base stuff on either like commonly told stories or also on historical figures as well. So it's not like that's abnormal, but equally, the reverse of him taking elements of stories from other people, he also inspired a lot of stories. Like, people say that The Merchant of Venice is heavily influenced by Marlowe's The Jew of Malta, and also Titus Andronicus and The Massacre at Paris have very similar kind of goals and aims. Like, it's a very similar audience, it's very similar death tolls, it's very much like violence after violence after violence. Like, they're really similar. And Shakespeare actually quotes Christopher Marlowe in As You Like It, and I wonder what it would have been like if he was able to write more plays, because lots of these playwrights wrote like 30, 40, 50. There's a few of them who have written loads of plays, and he didn't get around to doing that. But since he was so successful at such a young age, I do wonder how his style would have developed, and if he would have become more poetic, or like if there's value as well, like in theatre, I think, in being direct and like saying direct dialogue and like harsh home truths. And he was really one to do that even with his own opinions in his personal life. Like, he was very open about who he was and what he thought, and he was a bit violent and he had a temper on him, but like he was very much direct and to the point, so I feel like that would have influenced his style regardless. But let me know what you think he would have been like if he would have written more plays. And he's a very like controversial figure as well, so I don't really know how to feel about it, because he's very like anti-religion. He said stuff that upset people, he did violence, but also he was murdered, but also he was really like giving that gay representation, like gay icon energy in some aspects, but also violent energy, which I don't like. So I guess we're all quite complex, but I feel like in his life and his plays and his work, he was always really authentically himself, which is really interesting to see, especially back in the day when there were so many different restrictions and like so much like different pressures to what we have today. It's interesting to see who he was because I feel like we get a really clear picture of that. So let me know what you think about him in the comments. Let me know what you think of the plays. Let me know what kind of other videos you'd like to see from me. And also, I've taken time to make this, so please subscribe, stay tuned for more, and to support all of the effort that I've put into this video. And thank you so much. Let's chat in the comments. Thanks. Bye.